In this 3-part series, I'm going to finally tell you how to plan a round the world itinerary, how much will it cost, and how you can definitely save enough money to make it happen. I'm going to be approaching this video as if you are planning a big multi-month trip to multiple locations. Extra bonus, all 3 of these videos come with digital downloads. Got lots of fun spreadsheets for you that you can check out on our blog, so I will link the website down below. And if you are willing to part with your email address, we will award you with a couple freebies down in the description box. The world is a book, and those who do not travel read only a page. I'm sure you've heard this cliche St. Augustine travel quote before. Okay, but do you know how long that book would have to be if it really was the entire world? No one would even want to open the book. It would just be way too intimidating, way too many pages. Planning a round the world trip can be a daunting task, even if you are an experienced traveler, just because there are so many places to visit. And let me tell you, the more that you travel, the more that you learn about, and the less you feel like you've even seen. In this video, we approach planning an itinerary in a systematic manner that helps you make decisions along the way, no matter whether you're traveling solo or with a friend. Step 1 in the process is your destination bucket list. This is probably one of the more fun stages of the process. You probably can name a lot of these off the top of your head because you and maybe your travel partner have been chatting back and forth of all the places that you want to see and the things that you want to do. When Tim and I were planning our round the world trip that we left on in 2015 and had been planning for and saving for 2 years before that, we knew that we wanted to do things just by conversations that we were having. It was really important to Tim that he go to Oktoberfest in Munich.
Very.
I knew I wanted to go to Santorini. It was just like the most quintessential travel destination location that I remember seeing as a kid. During this step of the process, even though this is all very conversational, you might already know it in your head, start to get these ideas down on paper somewhere. I'm going to give you a location to put all of this in just a second, but maybe if you even have just a saved note in your phone of your bucket list destinations, they're at least all in one place. If you think about something one time in bed before going to sleep, you can add it really quickly to your bucket list. Once you feel like you are out of the daydreaming stage of the process and you are ready to get started and start planning, that is a great time to use our free downloadable spreadsheet. I already mentioned earlier in the video, you can go to the blog article in the link in the description box and then grab, it's just an Excel spreadsheet. This is going to help you start to map out how all of this is going to fit together in this crazy big puzzle. Because now in step 2, we're going to use all of those bucket list destinations and start to determine the length of stay at each of these destinations. Now, of course, your list of destinations likely will grow from just these couple big bucket list activities. But before it grows too big, we're first going to determine the length of stay. So for an example, like we were talking about, Tim really wanted to go to Oktoberfest. Now, did that mean that we needed to spend 3 weeks in Munich just to make Oktoberfest happen? Likely not, because Oktoberfest is incredibly expensive and that would have drained almost our entire budget to stay in Oktoberfest too long. So if our trip to Oktoberfest meant that that was going to be 3 nights in Munich, then I would put Oktoberfest as the destination or event, not just broad like Germany. Put Oktoberfest and then 3 days. Look, we already have 3 nights of the trip planned. You know, apart from accommodation and like all the transportation to get there. My example for Santorini. What's an appropriate length of time in Santorini? Well, by the time you fly to the island or take a ferry from Athens, we'll definitely want to be staying more than 1 night. 10 nights on the island, maybe that's a bit much. So since this is such a priority for me, I'm going to put in the number 7. So 1 week in Santorini is just part of my personal bucket list. Now already, just from 2 bucket list activities, and you might already have 5 or 10, you can start to see how when I think about this big picture, there's some aspects that start to fall into place and make sense. If I'm already going to be in Munich for Oktoberfest, perhaps there's other parts of Germany that I want to explore. Or hey, it's a quick train ride over to Salzburg and maybe I want to see a bit of Austria while I'm there. Not to mention, intercontinental flights within Europe are so extremely inexpensive. Heck, where else in Europe do we want to go visit? Once we're already there, it's so much cheaper to travel close. We know that we're already going to be in Santorini. Wouldn't that be a great time to visit Athens as well? So I'll build out the list a little bit by including other destinations that would be advantageous to have a layover in when I'm visiting these destinations, or just they're close and inexpensive to visit, so I'll add them to the list. Now, with just these 2 quick bucket list activities, we have over 2 weeks of travel planned. Okay, I shouldn't say planned. We have 2 weeks of travel scheduled. If we're adding in a couple more destinations, especially if they're on other continents, all of a sudden now we are increasing time and budget. Also going to want to add at least a window of dates of travel. So some specific events have specific dates. Oktoberfest is a great example. Believe it or not, the festival is actually not in the month of October, it is in September. So also don't just assume you know when the festival dates are. Other events, like if you wanted to attend a full moon party in Thailand, or the Chiang Mai Lantern Festival, the Hoi An Lantern Festival on the 24th of every month. That's really hard to narrow down, especially if you will be visiting multiple different specific events. Similar to the 3rd step, the 4th step applies dates to locations based on weather. So it might not be a specific event, but in the Santorini example, I'm not going to a specific event there, but there are very specific times of year when people even travel to Santorini. I'm not even sure that maybe the ferries run. A lot of the restaurants and a lot of the hotels are closed off season. Taking shoulder season into consideration and visiting locations at the right time for you, or the right time of the type of trip you want to have, is essential. For example, if you are traveling to Paris and you know that you'll be wanting to do a lot of sightseeing, museum tours, a food tour, you wouldn't necessarily need to travel in the height of summer with the crowds if you plan on spending a lot of your time inside. Maybe it would be better to travel to Paris in November if you are a museum goer. When you're researching weather for the location, the country you plan on visiting might be smaller geographically than the USA, for example. That doesn't necessarily mean that the weather at that location in the entire country is all the same. So be as specific as possible for the weather research on your location. Another kind of bonus tip or side step in this process that you also want to look at is different wildlife patterns in that area. So there is a lot of wildlife tourism available to you when you are traveling, and if you are going to a destination because you want to do some type of experience, if you are visiting the Yucatan in Mexico and you want to swim with whale sharks in Almujeres, you have to be there at the time of year that the whale sharks are passing through. Or if you are heading out on safari in Africa, the herds of animals are doing different things at different times of the year. Don't I sound like a wildlife expert? What I do know is that it varies, and you don't want to naively book your trip at a time of year that isn't catered towards the type of travel that you want to do. Then the 5th step, the fun part, you can start to take this spreadsheet and move pieces around. So let's say that you don't even know when you want to do this trip. Now that you've narrowed down the length of stay for different locations and the time of year that is the best time of year for you to go, you can start to map it out. So I would map it out in rows down the list chronologically from when you'll be traveling. So if you plan on leaving in July, you can start your first month in July and start to piece all the things together. Okay, Europe, July, 7 days here, 10 days here, 7 days here. Okay, now it's working into October. we're gonna want to start to leave Europe if we don't want to be there when it's too cold, and that would be a great time to head to Southeast Asia. And another tip that I just thought about while I'm editing, make sure you're also documenting the visa requirements of the country that you're planning on going to. So we've been talking a lot in this video about Europe. For the US, we only have 90 days in Europe. So make sure that you're staying within your visa requirements. You guys know that we've traveled a lot within Vietnam. Vietnam, only a 30-day visa on arrival. You need to get an e-visa, blah, blah, blah. I won't go into all the details right here, but just make sure that you aren't exceeding the visa limitations within the country you're traveling. And coming from just a planner, someone that just likes, I mean, I made this spreadsheet for goodness sake. I like planning. But what I will say to you is do not overplan your trip. The only way that you can kind of get bogged down into trouble is if you overplan. Travel is so flexible, especially in other parts of the world. UK, you guys can like last minute book a flight in Europe anywhere you want, and it's inexpensive. For the US, you know, you're gonna spend $400 if you book a flight last minute to travel domestically. Just get that out of your head. There's always a cheap way to get to your next destination in many other places in the world. So don't feel like you need to plan all of your activities, your accommodation, or your transportation in advance. When we traveled on our 10-month trip around the world in 2015 and 2016, we booked the long haul flights in advance because those were the most expensive, and we were also using credit card points to book those. So when you're using credit card points to book, you want to book them far in advance to make sure that you get a good deal on your points. From there, that set the framework for us, and it was really easy then to start to make smaller plans within the confinements of those big long haul flights. For really inexpensive countries, like for us in Vietnam, we don't even book accommodations until like the day before we're there. And the reason for that is because we don't necessarily know how long we're gonna be staying somewhere. We don't know if we're gonna have food poisoning. We don't know if we're gonna be jet lagged. So on this last trip to Vietnam, we just booked our flight there. We booked the first 2 nights, and then that was about it. We knew where we were going to be and what we wanted to do. And if we were staying at a competitive, pricey hotel, like when we stayed at Topa's Eco Lodge, we had reservations there for a specific date, but those 8 days in between, we didn't have concrete plans. I love talking money, and in the second part of this series, we're gonna dive into how to budget for all of these destinations using the same spreadsheet. So I'll see you in the next video.